I blew dry it earlier and it's sitting kind of funny, but you know, I'll live. I live. So today we are doing a review of two books. Two books. We're doing Only Say Good Things, Surviving Playboy and Finding Myself by Crystal Hefner versus Down the Rabbit Hole. I think it's Surviving Playboy or something by Holly Madison, right? So I read both of these books relatively recently. I bought this one from Waterstones, which is pretty much where I get all my books if I don't buy them online. And I got Down the Rabbit Hole by Holly Madison on Spotify. It was one of their free audiobooks. So if you're an audiobookophile like I am, that's where you can check it out. I think you can also get this on Spotify. You can definitely get it on Audible, but you'd have to buy it. So I've always been relatively interested in Playboy in general. And you know what? I never watched The Girls Next Door. That was not my thing. We didn't have TV, but the world of Playboy really fascinated me for like years. We had this book in the house when I was a teenager called The Tears of a Playboy Bunny, and it was just insane. And I really liked it, but it kind of chronicled the 60s and 70s of Playboy. And I knew like bits and pieces. I knew about Pamela Anderson, of course, and Marilyn Monroe and some of the other shenanigans that had gone on, but I always found the whole thing really, really fascinating. I apologize if you can hear my fiance in the other room. He's on a work call, so I've been relegated to the kitchen again, but I don't mind. But this was kind of my chance to take a deeper dive because he died recently, and we watched the documentary on Prime about Hugh Hefner's life. And I remember thinking that it was a really glossy version. It was a super glossy version of what Hugh Hefner's life would have been. And I kind of wanted to see what else was going on. So this book is really good. I read this in about a week. It's not very long. I want to see how many pages it is. It's 229 pages, so it's not long, and it has photos in the middle. So it's not a super detailed, account, but you get all the stuff you're actually interested in, like how the girlfriends were treated. And I think as well, like, Crystal arrived right at the downfall of Playboy. Like, I don't want to say the downfall, but the downward slide of Playboy. So Holly Madison came in kind of very early 2000s, and Crystal, I think, came in about 2008. So there's a 10-year age gap between both their stories. Holly Madison's Down the Rabbit Hole is definitely more, I want to say, glossy. It's not as gritty or as dirty or as sexy, for lack of a better word. She doesn't go into detail about what happened with her and Hugh Hefner that much. There's kind of one scene, and that's all they talk about. Sorry, I thought that was a cat, but I'd already let her in. So this one, differently, she goes into a lot of detail of what was expected of the girlfriends sexually, and how often, and with how many people, and what was used, and the baby oil. And it's interesting, but it's sad as well, because I think the girls next door and people like Kendra and Holly Madison perpetuate this myth that he was just a kind old man that looked after them, when that is not the case. And I think Holly Madison, to some extent, perpetuated that idea and continued it. You've got these glossy photos, but Crystal talks about how glossy it was, but also how horrible it was, how restrictive their lives were. And I think, luckily for Holly, she found a friend in Bridget, and she found success with the Girls Next Door TV show, whereas for Crystal, it was really the end of Hef's life and his career, and she didn't find any friends within the mansion, and she didn't really have an outlet. I know later on in the book, towards the end of Hef's life, she gets really into DJing, and that's good. I'm happy for her, but when she talks about the proposal, for example, she never said yes. He never got down on one knee. She just accepted the acceptance. Hello, Michael Ronaldo. And I think as well, Crystal had a lot of trauma in her early life that I think Holly didn't. And in Holly Madison's book, she really dislikes Crystal. You can tell that she really dislikes Crystal. It jumps off the page. And she talks about how bitchy Crystal is, how much she slanders her, but they never go into detail. Like, she never knows Crystal. They have like a couple of brief encounters, and I think Crystal put up a wall to protect herself. Hello. So lessness. And it is interesting, like Crystal with her dad dying, and then her fiance dying, the abortion, the rape, and then to wind up in the Playboy Mansion aged 22, kind of failing at life, having to live with her mom again in a one-bedroom apartment. You know, she had a lot less options than Holly did. Holly was, even though it was similar, Holly still had a family to go back to, whereas Crystal didn't really. Her sisters were kind of down south, and her mum was moving on with another man. So I think in that respect, Holly felt a lot more trapped. Crystal felt a lot more trapped than Holly. And then with Holly, of course, finding fame with the girls next door, that worked. I think Crystal is maybe a bit more closed off than Holly, and I think in both their ways, they both cared deeply about Hugh Hefner, and I think in that respect, they were quite similar. They seemed to, I don't want to say love him, but maybe love is the right sort of word, but love as in like the way you love your dad or a pet. You know, they did love him. They both appreciated greatly what he did for them, and I think to some extent, Holly was very, very jealous of Crystal for being able to put up with it for the long haul, and I think that's something that, you know, Crystal even said it nearly killed her having to stay there for 10 years. And I think Holly was there for 8, so, you know, there's similarities. Yes, I am Irish. The similarities between them there are striking, but definitely, I think, you know, they talk about the parties, and I think, you know, Crystal, unlike, maybe Holly did this but didn't want to talk about it in the book, they provided Hef with new women, new girlfriends. There was a constant flow, and the parties were ways of getting them in, you know, and that's not something that Holly wants to talk about. She's like, oh, I didn't do that, I left that up to the other girls. And I'm like, would you have survived so long and been the top girlfriend if you hadn't been bringing other women in, you know? Would you have remained the bottom bitch? They both talk as well about discovering what Hef likes and how they learnt that really quickly. So they were like, he doesn't like red lipstick, he likes bleached blonde hair, he likes a lot of makeup. You know, he likes that kind of almost stripper-esque look. And I think that is very, you know, interesting that both the girls studied what he liked and what the girls around him were like that he admired so that they could survive. In Holly's book, she talks about how she really disliked the fact that Crystal remodeled the bedroom, like, well, the vanity that Hef had in his room. And I think that's so unfair because when Holly moved into the room after, I think, Tina left in the book, she remodels, she rips up the carpet. And I think that's like, you know, Holly's been a bit of a hypocrite there, you know, and she's like judging, you know, Crystal. And you're like, well, you know, it's not your house anymore. I mean, if you sell your house and you get annoyed somebody painted a different color, like that's, you know, nothing you can do about it. You don't own it anymore. And that kind of bugged me. There were a few other times where she described Crystal as being really, really standoffish, but they were always out in public, and I think when you read this book, Crystal was so scared of coming across as needy or coming across as insecure that she just became an ice maiden. And yeah, like, that can be standoffish, but, you know, it was kind of mean, you know? And then there's one scene in particular in Holly's book that she talks about where Crystal is on the girls next door and says, oh, I'm not the new Holly, Holly is the old me. And Holly even says, oh, you know, I've been fed lines, I'm sure Crystal was fed that line, it's not her fault, but then continues to go on and bash her. And I'm like, girl, you're being hypocritical. So I think I definitely come out as a Crystal girl. She's a lot more honest and a lot more, I think, real about her experience and her very messed up relationship with Hugh Hefner. I'm trying to see if there's any more photos. So like, she talks about only really making one friend in the mansion, and if you think about it, Holly only ever really made one true friend. She only really made Bridget a friend, and there's Amber. Amber, of course, never became a girlfriend. There she is beside Crystal, but they have a very similar relationship, I think, to what Holly had with Bridget, where they both understood the game and were generally nice people. They both talk about as well the money situation that went on and the $1,000 a week, but you had to make sure and spend it. In Holly's book, I thought it was really interesting that she talks about how this had come into effect and how Hugh was determined, after spending too much money on his girlfriends, that this had to be curtailed, which I get. So this is the first night that Crystal ever met Hugh Hefner, and it's as well, like Crystal especially talks about how one of Hess' relationship merged into the next, that none of these women really deep down meant anything to him. They were all placeholders. There's a bit where she talks about Hess' final birthday where he was, oh damn it, okay, final birthday, sorry, I got a text and I was like, Hess' final birthday, where they just, you know, they keep putting different images on the cake. You know, before Holly and Hef on the cake, the Casablanca cake, it was Hef and Tina, and before that it was somebody else, and before that it was somebody else, and he just keeps replacing these women one after another. And I think if he had continued to live, you know, it would have been somebody else after Crystal, and I think he married her to get her to stay. In all honesty, stay to the end so she would get the money. And I think as well, you know, Holly talks about her depression in her book and her anxiety over the whole situation she'd got herself into. And, you know, she has absolutely no sympathy for the fact that Crystal went through the same thing. She seems to think that she's a one-off and nobody else ever felt like that in the Playboy Mansion. And that kind of annoys me because, you know, Crystal's a lot more open about, you know, this is a bad situation I got myself into. But I think that's my review. I definitely prefer Crystal Hefner's Only Say Good Things to Holly Madison's. I give this one probably a 9 out of 10, and I give Holly Madison's, I would say, a 5. It's a general good read. But until next time, bye.